Kentucky's Isaiah Jackson was one of the most fearsome rim protectors in all of college basketball this year. But was that enough to make him a lottery pick in the 2021 NBA draft? This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. Isaiah Jackson stood out above the rest in a highly disappointing and unusual season for the Kentucky Wildcats. A 5-star prospect coming out of high school, he was one of the few Kentucky players who actually lived up to their reputation. Jackson led the SEC in blocks per game and was rightfully placed in his conference's all-defense team. At 6'11" with a wingspan over 7'2", Jackson has ideal measurements to play either front court spot in the NBA. But his long-term future is likely at center, where he could eventually become one of the best rim protectors in the league. Unlike other prospects, we have to start on defense with Isaiah Jackson. Jackson is a monster shot blocker who was among the best rim protectors in all of college basketball. He is a pogo stick athlete, able to get off the floor in a second to erase absolutely everything that is coming towards the rim. Jackson quickly made his mark at Kentucky as the most imposing big in the Southeastern Conference. He led the SEC in blocks per game and in block percentage. That means that Jackson blocked almost 13% of the shots his opponent took while he was on the floor. Jackson has incredible instincts when it comes to protecting the rim. He is a tremendous help side defender, as he can sniff out danger even when he is not directly involved in the defensive possession and make things go Kentucky's way at the basket. Jackson's athleticism and bounciness ensures that he is able to cover tons of ground on the defensive end of the floor, both horizontally and vertically. Just ask Kansas, who Jackson tortured all night defensively. Jackson had a season-high 8 blocks against the Jayhawks in what is probably considered his signature game in college. On that night, Jackson blocked almost 1/4 of all the shots he faced. Jackson's value when it comes to rim protection was not limited to just help defense. The big man out of Kentucky also showed that he could stay with drives and then come up with a rejection. He is an absolute menace defensively who is always dialed in. Just watch this chase down block. Jackson flies down the length of the court, even with Kentucky down 15. Such is the intimidation factor with Jackson that he impacts everything at the basket. Just watch him here against South Carolina. He forces the driver to pass it off, and then his second jump is elite to get the rejection. Or in these next 2 clips, where the ball handlers are so afraid of Jackson that their shots don't even hit the rim. That's all due to him. One might expect Jackson to struggle defending the post since he is only 206 pounds, but the truth is, he makes up for that weight difference with his leaping and shot blocking. I go back to the game against Kansas yet again, where Jackson made life miserable for David McCormick, who is a dominant post player in college, and eventually he got stuffed at the rim. Or here, against Day'Ron Sharpe, where Jackson rejects his shot at its apex. In terms of what Jackson might face at the NBA level, I wish we had seen more. He showed some good instincts guarding pick and rolls, but opponents didn't really run those types of plays against Jackson. Kentucky did not switch a whole lot on defense all year, but I thought Jackson showed some promise guarding down positions against Alabama. He clearly has the foot speed to keep up with smaller players on drives, and I think he will project well on switches in the NBA. However, the Kentucky big still has some defensive areas he needs to improve on. The first is that Jackson tries to block absolutely everything. Basically, if you go up against Jackson, then he is going to try to stuff your shot no matter what. We talk all the time about score-first players or pass-first players, but Jackson is a block-first player. A lot of the time, getting that rejection is all that's on his mind. That makes Jackson prone to some unnecessary mistakes on this end of the floor. He is too jumpy, meaning that he is too willing to pursue a block despite the fact that he cannot always get there. Because of this penchant for blocks, Jackson can take himself out of position too easily at times. One example of this is here, against Mississippi State. Jackson tries to block the floater even though it is honestly impossible and is not there to grab the rebound. Thankfully, Kentucky got a lucky break on the putback attempt. The second problem that Jackson faces sort of relates back to his first one. At times, it feels like Jackson has too much trust in his shot blocking. Because of that, he does not always find it imperative to be in the right position. Jackson thinks that he can make up for any mistakes with his long reach and quick burst, which to some extent is true, but he cannot always rely on that. Jackson needs to make sure that he is in the right position to start with, so that he does not lag behind the play and then have to make up for that. Finally, the last problem that Jackson encounters is simply foul trouble. Right now, he is too foul prone. That was a problem for Kentucky all year long since they were so much better with Jackson on the floor. Jackson averaged about 6 fouls per 48 minutes. He could not be counted on to stay on the floor sometimes, getting tossed out of 6 games for the Wildcats. Now, let's get into what Jackson can do on attack. Offensively, Jackson is a fairly simple player right now. That's not to say that he is entirely one-dimensional, but you cannot rely on him to do a whole lot on this end of the floor. The one thing that Jackson excels at is catching the ball deep in the paint and then just finishing. He enjoyed a fairly efficient season for Kentucky, finishing with a true shooting percentage of 59%. Jackson made most of his buckets at the rim, finishing those shots at a 68% clip. He also had the most dunks out of anyone on the Wildcats, showing both his athleticism and the quality of the shots he took. Kentucky did not need to call a whole lot of plays for Jackson, because he can be productive just by being around the basket. Still, he was aggressive calling for the ball. Whenever he had good position and once he got the ball, Jackson could go up in a hurry because of his quick jump. As you might expect, Jackson is also comfortable playing above the rim. I think he will shine even more in this capacity with the improved spacing at the NBA level, because sometimes there wasn't a lot of room for him to fly in college. That's why on offense, Jackson has a seamless projection as a rim-running big who can finish lobs in transition and pick and rolls. Jackson is also a constant threat on the boards. He is a tremendous rebounder who gobbles them up whenever he's on the floor. Crucially for his team, Jackson's appetite for rebounding extends to crashing the offensive glass. He averaged 2 offensive rebounds per game and was hard to keep away from the basket. This is one area where Jackson adds tons of value. He is great at tracking down misses, even if they are his own at times, and snaring them down with his active hands and rapid burst. Because Jackson pops off the floor so quickly, he keeps tons of misses alive and gives Kentucky second chance opportunities to score. Jackson does not always secure the offensive rebound he's looking for, and he might even foul while crashing the glass, but he is always there. In a good way, he is very annoying to play against. One of the funnest aspects of Jackson's game is his putbacks, and of course, this goes back to his offensive rebounding. Jackson led Kentucky with 19 total putbacks, and like I said, he's someone you will always need to account for. Jackson gets easy buckets just by being the first one off the floor for either team. This is a skill, not just luck. Another thing that Jackson has shown is an ability to inflict damage on quick moves out of face-ups. He cannot really put the ball on the floor for long periods of time, but Jackson is such a quick twitch athlete that he can attack off of just one dribble. He uses this dribble to gain momentum, and his first step is enough to take him all the way to the basket. Jackson reminds me a little bit of Montrezl Harrell in how he is so forceful and sudden out of face-ups. Because Jackson is so sharp, he is hard to stop once he gets moving. You can't really recover and stay in front of him once he gets the step on you. Jackson uses this speed mismatch intelligently to draw fouls and get to the charity stripe. He only shot about 3.5 free throws per game, but Jackson actually got to the line a lot. Relative to his field goal attempts, he drew free throws at a really high ratio. Those numbers only went up in Southeastern Conference play, with Jackson attempting 1 free throw per less than every 1.3 shots he took. Jackson shot 70% from the free throw line in his freshman year, which is not great, but also means you cannot just foul him every time. His percentage also improved in the second half of the season. But like I said, Jackson's offensive game is not very versatile. If he is not catching and finishing or operating off a snappy face-up, then Jackson is limited. He does not have any moves in the post and needs to work on his physicality. Jackson is too skinny for a center, and although that did not affect him too much at times, there were instances where he played too soft. Jackson isn't entirely comfortable yet just taking it into his rival's chest and trying to finish through them consistently. Sometimes he shies away from contact and leans back. That leads to Jackson taking off-balance shots and missing close to the basket. It's also true that his face-up eventually becomes too predictable. Once he has done it a few times, you sort of know what to expect, and Jackson lacks counter moves. He'll be looking to get into something off one dribble every time, so as long as you give him some distance, then you give yourself a solid chance of getting a stop, drawing a charge, or trapping him under the basket. Jackson would really be helped by a reliable short pull-up, but that is not the case yet. This is a tool that he is still trying to add to his arsenal. So far, he has not had much success, but I don't think Jackson's shot is broken. The release is a bit slow, but he has decent mechanics and fluidity for a 6'11" big. Going forward, making these shots will be very important for him. Jackson shot just 35% on 2-point jumpers. And for now, let's forget about threes. Jackson took just 2 in his first year for Kentucky and missed both of them. If Jackson's short jumpers went in, then opponents would not be able to just sag off and play the drive. As for playmaking and facilitating for others, Jackson is not very advanced. He had more turnovers than assists, but that tends to be the case for college bigs, and his numbers are not worrying. Jackson turned the ball over at around the same rate as Kai Jones or Evan Mobley, for instance. Teams should just not ask him to do too much. However, I trust that Jackson will eventually become a respectable passer. He has shown glimpses of that already. Jackson is not going to blow your mind with his reads, but he can make the simple passes necessary to connect things on the floor. For instance, this high-low pass against Auburn eventually generates a wide-open 3 for Kentucky. If Jackson is not pressured and the floor is well spaced out, then he can play with his head up and execute what is needed of him. In the long run, Jackson should be fine. First of all, thank you for 500 subscribers, and thank you for following Floor and Ceiling so far. Now, let's get into Isaiah Jackson. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of labeling Jackson as one of those highly athletic bigs with a low IQ, but I don't think it's the case for him. Sure, he might not have outstanding feel for the game or anything like that, but he knows when to pick his spots and he knows how to be productive. Jackson, in my opinion, is one of the best athletes in the 2021 NBA draft. His rim protection might be the best in this class, and I think that he has shown enough potential on offense to warrant being a lottery pick. I know that The Athletic recently reported that Jackson might go back to Kentucky if he isn't a lottery pick in this year's draft, but to be honest, I think the fit is more interesting for him than the actual draft order. For instance, if Jackson was to go to the Charlotte Hornets, that would make a lot of sense in terms of reuniting with former teammate LaMelo Ball and also filling in a need that the Hornets need, while also getting plenty of game time in his rookie season. Sure, there's room for Jackson to improve his game, and there's definitely room for him to expand his game, especially on offense. But even if he remains what he is now, as long as he cuts down on the foul trouble, and as long as he stays more disciplined in regards to going for blocks and knowing when to go for them, then he should be a productive NBA player for years to come. Right now, I have Jackson as the 3rd or 4th best big in the class, behind Evan Mobley and Kai Jones for sure, and, right about there with Alperen Şengün. I think that Şengün is probably a better basketball player right now, and he is definitely a smarter basketball player. But in terms of NBA role and in terms of NBA projection, I think that Isaiah Jackson just has a more easy, seamless role that he can go into on day one. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Isaiah Jackson, and if you want to see more content, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.